Welcome to Step Into the Story. My name is Phil Tuttle, and I serve as president of Walk Through the Bible. And as you can probably tell from our name, we're all about the Bible. For more than 40 years, what I'm going to teach you the next few days has been taught to over 30 million people in more than 150 countries, dozens of languages all over the world. Usually, this is taught in churches or schools, but you are part of something that's never happened before. This is the first time we've ever brought this teaching right into people's homes. So thank you for welcoming me into your home. If you're like us and our family, you're spending a lot more time in your home than you usually do. And we thought this was the perfect time to give families and singles, folks, a chance right where they are to get the big picture of this book that we call the Bible. It's got the answers for every problem we face, including the unique challenges of this season as the whole world battles against the coronavirus. A lot of times, the Bible can be pretty overwhelming to us. It's this big book, and especially the part that we call the Old Testament or the Hebrew Scriptures. It's about the first 3/4 of it. And that can be an overwhelming amount of material with a lot of hard names and thousands of years of history. In a lot of ways, it's really like a jigsaw puzzle. My grandma would always get us started on jigsaw puzzles, and so I grew up very much enjoying this. And you look at this one has 300 pieces, kind of medium hard. There's some brown pieces in here. There's some blue pieces in here. I wonder if that's water or maybe that's the sky. And we start trying to figure all this out. There's a whole lot of green, so there must be some grass or some trees. Well, the makers of a jigsaw puzzle help us out. They give us something to help us put things together. And what is it? It's the box cover. It's the big picture. And that's what I'm going to help us to get in the next 5 sessions. Your pastor, your priest, your minister, your teacher, your mom or your dad, or maybe just you studying on your own. Usually we pick up one piece of the puzzle and we look at it in detail because the Bible's so loaded. That's what we have to do to really appreciate it. But God has also created our minds so that we crave order. We like to put together the big picture. And that's what we're going to do together in these next 5 sessions. Really, in each session, we'll learn 8 steps of the storyline. So altogether, we're going to learn about 40 events and people that make up the big picture of the Old Testament. We're not going to go scuba diving. We're going to go kind of water skiing across the surface. And we're really just getting the outline of the storyline. If I were to put together that puzzle, I would start with the 4 corners. I'd dig through that pile of pieces and I'd find the 4 corners and I'd put them on my table and then I'd try to build out from those. In this first session that we call Beginnings, all of these come from the book of Genesis. We're going to learn together 4 events and then 4 people. And these 4 events are really like the 4 corners. They're the foundation of the rest of the story. You don't have to read very far at all in the Bible to come to the very first thing that God does. Genesis 1:1 says, "In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth." So our first event is creation. Everybody say that together in your living room, or even if you're all by yourself, say it out loud. It'll help you to learn it a whole lot better. Everybody say creation. Go ahead. Ready? Creation. 1 down, 39 more to go. Now, kids, it's about event number 33 or 34. Their minds will start to clog up. Adults, like me, it's about event number 3 or 4. So we're going to all learn together like we used to learn when we were kids. We're going to get our bodies involved with this. This will help deal with the wiggles, too. Take your hands like this, in your hands, and make a big world, just like that. Out of nothing, because there's nothing in your hands, God took nothing, and out of nothing, He made everything. And as you do that, say creation. Try it again. Ready? Here we go. Creation. You can see me, but I can't see you. I wish I could see through the camera and be watching you right now. Because Sergey in Kyiv, Ukraine, I'm not sure you're making a big enough world. If you have a big God, you make a big world and say, creation. God made the planets, He made the sun and the moon, He made the stars. He took this one special planet called Earth. He put the water on it. He caused things to grow, plant life. And He also made the animals. And he made all sorts of animals. Some of the animals were in the sea, like this big shark here. He doesn't look too scary, does he, even though he's got those big teeth there? He made animals like this. This is a tiger. I wouldn't want to run into a tiger walking down the street. And then he made this. This is a wild one. Here, look at all those stripes. Probably makes the camera freak out a little bit. That's a zebra. And then there were the birds. They're all these different animals, all this different creation. Huge animals like a whale and little tiny things like a ladybug. God made all of that, and then toward the end of the creation, he made the first man, Adam, and a little while later, he made him a wife by the name of Eve, the first man and the first woman. And he says, Adam and Eve, this is all of yours. Take care of this planet. You are in charge of this. And only people does it say that God made in his image. God is relational. God likes people, and he created people so that we can be his closest friends. So we'll say creation. Take your hands like this. Do it again. Ready? And say creation. Now your hands are almost always in the right place for the next thing I'm going to teach you. The next step, drop your hands like this and say fall. Try it again. Creation, fall. Make sure you're doing it with me. They're in this perfect tropical garden paradise called the Garden of Eden. Everything is great. God looks at what he's made and he says, it is good. But you know what? If you watch the news right now, or you listen to adults especially talk, you go, things don't seem very good right now. When did things get messed up? Where did we go off track? That's that second event, fall. Because Satan enters into the Garden of Eden, and he comes first to Eve and then to Adam, and he lies to them. Satan's main goal, he's God's enemy, and he wants to push God off the throne of the universe. He wants to be the boss of the whole world. And he takes what God has said. God said, this is all yours to enjoy. Just stay away from that one tree over there. Don't eat of its fruit, or you will surely die. But he comes to Adam and Eve and he says, hey, did God say you can't enjoy any of this? See how he twists God's word just a quarter of a turn? God's holding out on you. God's keeping his best from you. God knows if you eat of the fruit of that tree, your eyes will be open. Your mind will be just as smart as he is. And Adam and Eve both believed the lie, and they ate of the fruit of that tree they were supposed to stay away from. And in that instant, sin entered into the world. We call that the fall of the whole world, of the human race. The cool thing about this, Adam and Eve now try to run and hide. They start blaming each other. It's her fault. It's his fault. Satan, he made me do it. God comes after them. He comes searching for them. It is always God who makes the first move to come and find us, no matter how bad we mess up. And that's what sets our faith away from every other religion in the world. Our God, the one true God, comes after people because he made us for a relationship, and he will do anything he can to restore that relationship with us. And that's a huge truth. So say these two with me. Ready? Creation, fall. Well, sin, it doesn't just happen once. It starts to spread. It's spreading faster than a virus, faster than a forest fire out of control. Eventually, God brings judgment or discipline. We've broken God's heart because of our sin. And God loves us yet, but he's also holy and he's perfect. And so God decides he's going to kind of start over. He sends a big flood. And if we had a flood, if we had a big rain coming, you know what we do? We get an umbrella like this. And my wife is always wanting me, have you got an umbrella? You take an umbrella to work with you today? There's rain in the forecast. And when it rains, what do? Boom, just like that. We lift up the umbrella. Well, that's fine if it just rains a little bit or for a couple of days. But this is different. This is a huge flood. An umbrella isn't going to do it. And so God chooses a man named Noah, and he has him build an ark. It takes him years and years. This is a rescue boat. And Noah and his wife, their 3 sons, their 3 daughters-in-law, they get on the ark and they supernaturally sail to safety. And God saves the human race from destruction. Just like God created life in the first place, it's God who, even during this scary time with COVID-19, it's God who can protect us. It's God who can keep us alive. So our third step is this flood. We just said fall. Now take your hands like this, make the waters going up, and say flood. And it was a big flood, so drag it out and say flood. That's 3 steps. That's 3 corners of the puzzle. The fourth one is this. They get off the ark, and God says, be fruitful and multiply and fill the whole earth. They were fruitful and they multiplied. That part was actually pretty fun. You can ask your mom or dad to explain that one to you. That's not what I was brought here to teach you today. But they liked that part. But they didn't spread out over the whole earth. Instead, they clustered all together in one place. They were going to build a tower. They were going to get to God, but they were going to do it on their terms by their own efforts. And still today, there's millions of people trying to get to God by their own efforts, by trying to be good enough, by keeping a bunch of rules. That was never the plan of God. And they're building away. They're going to build this tower all the way to the heavens. And God is going to creatively encourage them to obey. Use your imagination a little bit. They're building away. They're on schedule. They're under budget. You know, they're boom, 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 boom. This is a very advanced culture back then. They're building away, and one day, God says, I told you to spread out. You're not obeying. Let me creatively encourage you to obey. Use your imagination. The Bible doesn't give us these details, but pretend that the foreman is up here on top, and he goes, Yo, Joe, send up some more 2x4s. I need some more wood. And Joe looks up at his boss, and he says, Quiero presentarle a mi amigo. We have a problem at the building site. And so he yells down to his other guy. He goes, Mike, something's wrong with him. Maybe he's been out in the sun too long. And Mike says, Warum bist du so blass? Wie spät können wir Frühstück haben? God confused the languages. Everybody who talked like this gathered over here. Everybody who talked like quiero presentarle, they went a different direction. The only way they could make sense of it was to find people who were speaking their same language. God confused the languages to spread the world out into nations. Take your hands like this, start here, spread them out, and say nations. Nations. So we've now learned 4 things. Let's do them together a couple of times, and you can try it without me. But let's do it together once first. Here we go. What's the first one? Creation, fall, flood, nations. Try it just right there in your own living room, in your own house. Do it together 3 times. Go ahead. I'll wait and I'll watch. So let's do it one more time all together. You ready? Here we go. Creation, fall, flood, nations. Whenever we go back to the beginning like that, because we're going to build this over the next 5 sessions, that's worth celebrating. That's worth getting excited about. You know, with the COVID-19 virus going on right now, even when we are released, some of you can't even leave your homes right now. Others have a little more freedom. But even when this crisis ends and we're out there, I think for a while they're going to say things like, be careful about hugging a bunch of people. It's okay with your family, but hugging a bunch of people. Or in my country, when we meet, we always shake hands. But that's a really good way to transmit germs. And they're saying maybe for a while we ought to just kind of bump elbows. Each time that we review this from the beginning, let's practice that, because that seems weird to me to bump elbows. But here's what we're going to do. After we say creation, fall, flood, nations, and we get to whatever we've learned, then I want you to say this. I want you to take and bump your elbow with somebody else in your family. Say, elbow, way to go. That sounds kind of weird. I feel sort of dorky doing that all by myself, talking into a camera. So you got to do it with me. Here we go. We got to go, elbow, way to go. In fact, you got to do that 3 times together after we review it. Let's try it again, and this time let's try something really hard. Let's not do the words, let's just do the motions. So super quiet, and let's just do the motions, and then we'll celebrate. Here we go. Ready? And then elbow, way to go. Yeah, you got it. Good job. I'm proud of you. So after we do The first 4 events, now we're going to learn 4 people. 4 people who are major parts of the storyline, a big part of God's plan. You see, after the creation and the fall, the whole rest of the Bible is the story of God coming after people because He loves us. The relationship with Him has been broken, messed up because of sin, and God is going to do whatever it takes to begin to put that relationship back together. He chooses a man named Abraham who lives far, far away in a city called Ur, and he says, Abraham, I'm going to form a covenant with you. That's a big word. That word covenant is like a contract. It's a deal. It's a special opportunity. He's making a promise to Abraham. He says, Abraham, I've got a new home picked out for you. Well, where are we going? I'm not going to tell you. I'll reveal that to you as we move. And they journey up between the Tigris and Euphrates River, and eventually they end up in a land today that we call Israel. And Israel is just a skinny little strip of land, and it's surrounded by 4 bodies of water, the Sea of Galilee, the Jordan River, and the Dead Sea, and over on this side, the Mediterranean. And they enter into this that we call the Promised Land. But he has also said to Abraham, Abraham, I'm going to give you and Sarah a child. They'd never had any babies up to this point. I'm going to give you a child. And now they say, well, wait a minute, Sarah's too old for that. Abraham, he ain't looking too great either. And they decide of their own plan to help God out. And that's a real complicated part of the story. But God repeats His promise. Abraham and Sarah, I said, I'm going to give you 2 a child. The Bible says Sarah laughed when she heard that. There's no way. That's impossible. And God says, remember that laughter. His name is Abraham, and God says, you're going to have kids, not just a child. You're going to have kids and grandkids and great-grandkids. Eventually, so many descendants that a whole nation is going to come from you. We find out later that's the nation of Israel. That's God's plan to multiply all this. But don't ever misunderstand. God's going to give them children like stars in the heavens. You ever been out, not in a big city where there's a lot of light, but out in the country where you can see so many stars? He says, Abraham, Sarah, that's what your family, that's what your descendants will be like. That many children and grandchildren. Well, not just one nation, though. And this is important because God's not just having one favorite nation, Israel. He says, ultimately, eventually, I will bless every people group on the planet through your descendants. We find out later one of their descendants is Jesus Christ, the promised Messiah. We're getting way ahead of our story. Abraham and Sarah didn't understand that, but through that descendant, He's going to make it possible for all people who believe in Him to have a relationship with Him fixed again. But that's Abraham. Take and pretend like you're throwing 3 stars up in the heavens and just say, Abraham. Do that with me. Abraham. Good job. I can see Courtney and Ryan out in Oklahoma City, I think. You're doing a very good job. I'm making that up. I wish I could see you. But you're doing a good job. You got to participate in this. It makes it so much easier to learn. Abraham and Sarah eventually have a son, and his name is Isaac. So throw those stars up there and then grab one of them and pull him down and say Isaac and rock him. He's their little bitty baby. He's the child of promise, born long after Sarah. Then any doctor would say, yeah, you can still get pregnant. You can have a baby. Long after people thought Abraham would ever become a dad. They laughed, and the name Isaac actually means laughter. Is that a cool name? Laughter, are you here? Okay, second row. Good, all right. That would be a wild name to go through life with. The cool thing about Isaac, he was a miracle baby. He's a miracle child. There's no way even science could explain this. It's impossible with people, but God did it anyway. You know, the truth of the matter is, every single boy or girl that's born is a miracle, just like Isaac. We had a hard time in our family starting to have kids, and eventually God brought along Emily and then Philip. I'll show you a picture of them in the next session when we get started. But it took a long time for us to have babies, not as long as Abraham and Sarah waited. Eventually, sure enough, Isaac was born. Every life God creates is a miracle. Well, Isaac eventually grows up, and Isaac gets married, and Isaac and his wife, they have twins named Esau and Jacob. We're going to focus on Jacob. He's the next main part of the storyline. Even though he was born second, he was determined to be number one. He spent his whole life trying to catch up with his older brother. My older brother, Steve, was 10 years older, and so we didn't compete that much because he was half grown by the time I was even born. But I wanted to be like him. I wanted to catch up with him. He's still, in a lot of ways, I just still look up to him, even though I'm 62 and he's 72 now. He's in a lot of ways still my hero. But I want to catch up, and I want to do things like he wanted to do when I was little. That's how Jacob was. His name means deceiver. He was always finding a way to get ahead. Even before he was born, he grabbed Esau's heel and he tried to pull him back so that he would be born first. Jacob, that's just the way he lived his life. He wrestled with everybody. Do you ever arm wrestle where you go like this and you take somebody else's arm and you try to see who's stronger? That's the way Jacob lived his whole life. So here's our hand sign for Jacob. Go like this and say, Jacob. Ready? Here we go. Jacob. Jacob wrestled with everybody. Most times he won too. Sometimes he got himself into some pretty big messes. But Jacob eventually even wrestled with God. And when you wrestle with God, there's no way you're going to win that one, because God is so much stronger and more powerful, more creative than we are. And Jacob wrestled with God one night, all night long. And God eventually says to him, "What is your name?" And Jacob wouldn't say. And finally, "What is your name?" He asked him a bunch of times, and Jacob finally says, It's deceiver. And God says, "That's right. But I'm going to give you a new name." And he changed his name to Israel. And the name Israel means God contends or God prevails. Really, it means God wins. Jacob finally said, "All right, God, you're in charge and I'm not. You win." You know, God has all different kinds of people. Some people, like Abraham, find it really easy to follow him and trust him. There's others who are more like Jacob, that it's a struggle. It's a battle. We wrestle with him. The cool part about this is God says, "I am the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob." So if you're one of those, whether you're a child or a teenager, whether you're an adult, if you're one of those who struggles sometimes to believe, who fights against God, realize that doesn't disturb him. He's perfectly fine with that. But the sooner that we say, "You know what? You are God and I'm not," then is when our lives really get exciting. So we say, Jacob. Jacob has 12 sons. Let's learn their names. No, we're not going to do all of them. How about we just learn one of them? The most famous of the sons was Joseph. And our hand sign for Joseph is this. Take your shirt or your sweater, grab it like this. Joseph was his father and mother's favorite. And so they gave him this special, beautiful robe. None of the other brothers and sisters got it. He had 11 brothers and one sister. They didn't get a robe like this. He was their favorite. Hey, mom or dad, realize that's not a really good thing to do as a parent. To pick one child who's the favorite. They ought to all be our favorites in different ways. For me, that's pretty easy because I have one daughter, Emily. And so I can tell her, "Emily, you are my favorite daughter." And I have one son, Philip. "Philip, you are my favorite son." That's pretty easy. But some of you have bigger families than that, and so you got to get creative. "You are my favorite oldest son. You are my favorite youngest son. You are my favorite son with brown hair." But I want you to take this as an assignment. from this session, and find a way to tell each of your kids, whether you have one or whether you have 11 kids, find a way before we get together again and tell them why they're your favorite, because they can all be their favorite. But Joseph's parents, they didn't do a very good job of that. And so Joseph's brothers, they really hated him. And eventually they were going to kill him, and instead they sold him off to a caravan that was headed off to Egypt. They saved his life, but he became a slave in a faraway land. He is accused of a crime he doesn't commit. He's put in jail. Every place he is, he works hard. He's faithful, and he keeps getting new authority. And eventually, from there in jail, Pharaoh, the king of the whole world, calls to him, and he needs a dream interpreted, and Joseph has that gift. We're flying through his story because there's 14 chapters in Genesis just about him. You got to read this on your own and not just depend on us water skiing across the top. There's so much to learn from Joseph's life. But eventually he interprets Pharaoh's dreams, and he explains there's going to be a big famine. Famine, you know what that is? Is when there's no food. That's even worse than when there's no toilet paper in the store. A famine, and it's not just where he lives, it's the whole known world. And meanwhile, back at home, there's Jacob and the other 11 brothers, and the famine hits there too. And they find out that there's grain in Egypt. They don't know Joseph's alive. They don't know. He's now in charge of all the grain of Egypt. He's in charge of the whole food supply for the most powerful nation on earth. And they go down there to buy grain, and eventually he tells them who he is, and it ends up through that God saves this family line. Why is that important? Because it's through this line that Jesus Christ will eventually be born. And so this is God keeping the family alive, because our God always finishes what he starts. We just learned 4 people. Let's review those, shall we? Here we go. There's Abraham, and then Isaac, Jacob, Joseph. Do those together a couple of times. Will you? Go ahead, I'll wait. Make those hand signs bigger. Stretch them out. Make sure everybody's got it. If somebody's still struggling with it, do it again. Encourage each other. You got it? Now let's hook those 4 people in with the 4 events that we learned in the beginning of this session. Want to do that? Come on, let's stand up. We need to stretch anyway. It's good to stretch a little bit. Let's hook in these 4 people with the 4 events that came before by going all the way back to the beginning. So you ready to start with creation? All right, here we go. Creation, fall, flood, nations, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph. A, good job. Celebrate. Elbow, way to go. Elbow, way to go. Elbow, way to go. Nice job. You all have done a great job tonight. We're off to a fantastic start with this. You know what? We're going to get together again. We're going to have 4 more of these sessions, but I want to hear from you. At the bottom of your screen, there's my email address. It's real easy. It's just phil@walkthrough.org. Just make sure you spell through the short way, T-H-R-U, phil@walkthrough.org. I want to know who's out there. Send me a thing and say, we are Sachabal and Anita. We're in Hyderabad, India. We are participating. We live in Ogallala, Nebraska. We're the Johnson family. We're doing this with you. If you would just let me hear from you, I would love that. If you've got a specific prayer request, you can send that too. But between now and the next session, if there's somebody else as we're going through this, you thought, I wish they were doing this with us, it's not too late. You can send them to the link that's on your screen. It's just walkthrough.org/step into the story, and they can find the link to the next session. They can even go back and see this session that you've just been a part of. They won't be live, but then they'll be caught up, and then the next session we can all start in together. This is going to be a fantastic adventure, and you are off to an absolutely wonderful start tonight. I'm so proud of you. Thank you so much for being part of Step Into the Story.